residents of the nation's capital are coming to terms with the new price of the premium motor spirit. Following the statement by the NNPC Limited that its price will sell between 990 and 1,150 naira per litre as a result of the purchasing price from the Dangote Refinery, motorists are calling on the federal government and the appropriate authorities to ensure the continued supply of petrol, as it will be double jeopardy to have to queue only to buy the products at high prices.
I don't even understand. Today you see the queue, tomorrow you will not see the queue. Whether they are trying to suffocate us, to put us into a state whereby we will now be begging, or they have a scheme they are really working on to just make us starve. I don't understand.
2 days, 3 days ago it was better, but today it has worsened. So almost virtually all the fuel stations are not selling. Government should just do everything that is possible for these things to disappear.
The queue was reduced for days, but only for, I think yesterday, we noticed that the queue is resurfacing again, which we don't know what is causing it. Because we believe that the fuel is available, it's expensive, and if the fuel is expensive, it should be available.
Some see the compressed natural gas as an alternative, while others have not heard about it.
The cost of even doing the CNG is high. We are talking of, in some places, it's over up to 1 million naira to install the CNG. And we heard that the government is subsidizing it. We have not really seen any subsidy concerning the CNG. It's an alternative that is good, but if it's available, then people can diversify towards the CNG. The CNG, they are not available. The ones that are doing it, 950, 850,000. So it's still expensive. So if you can have subsidies on the CNG, it's a good alternative to work.
You can alternate it for fuel. Yeah. So I've not seen where they sell or dispatch it. I don't know. So has people started selling it?
At the moment, the NNPC Limited has confirmed that its trucks have started moving petrol from Dangote Refinery as its principal off-taker. Dele Omoyeni, Channels Television News.
Well, the conversations haven't really stopped, but part of the developments we have is the reaction of the organized private sector to the arrangement. The Nigeria Employers Consultative Association says the PMS supply agreement between the federal government and Dangote refineries could reduce the pressure on foreign exchange demand, among a number of other issues to discuss. This morning, we have two gentlemen to have this conversation with us. Adeni Kono is an international public affairs analyst. He joins us virtually from Chicago in the USA, as well as Dr. Monday Ashibagu, who is a former editor, Energy Watch. He joins us also virtually. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Kono, let me begin with you. You've heard, and you've been following all of this conversation. First of all, in all of the issues that have been raised, which of them stands out the most for you?
I think what strikes me the most in this conversation is the lack of transparency in the deals. Whenever we talk about pricing within the oil sector, there are certain international standards expected of anybody who is actually within that sector in our country. So I'd like to begin with the price of crude. If we look at the latest debacle between the NNPC and, of course, Dangote Refinery, NNPC has not been able to tell us clearly the cost at which Dangote lifted its crude, the amount paid so far by Dangote, and what is the exchange rate. It is not possible anywhere in the world when anybody wants to talk about crude oil, the sale, and not talk about the exchange rate and not talk about what was charged. Even if Dangote has been operating as a private entity by not coming out to tell us everything we need to hear, I think it is a disservice to the Nigerian people, the owners of the crude oil that Dangote gets, not to know how much it paid. Of course, we know that Dangote refuted the 898 cost at which they said it is giving the refined product to them. But one key thing is that the NNPC must come out clean to tell us, and I'm deliberate about calling it the NNPC because the reforms, as we know, is expected to bring about some kind of reprieve to the Nigerian people, but that hasn't been possible. So the first thing that I'll ask expectantly is that the pricing has to have a lot of transparency done with it, which I haven't seen. Now let's also look at these things that we have. From the release we have from NNPC on Sunday, it's obvious that the state of the federation will not be getting the price of gas, as they say here, at the same rate. But one thing that has to be done is to look at the rates at which it goes to states that are obviously economically disadvantaged. If you go to, for instance, now here in Chicago, if you go to some parts of Chicago here, you will not get it for the same price as you go to some others. So if you're in Chicago as a city, for instance, you likely buy the commodity for $3.20 in some places per gallon, because that is what they sell. That's a gallon is about 3 liters and 8. So if you go to some parts of Illinois also, you likely get it for maybe $2.80 something cents. That is also for a gallon. I'm saying here that if you move the commodity from Lagos here or Ogun State all the way to Maiduguri and you get it for about 8,000, what is the, for instance, economic opportunities in Borno, in Yobe, that the people in those areas are able to pay? In this part of the world, the pricing is relative to the income of the people. Now, Chicago is of course a city in Illinois. It shares border with Indiana. If you just border and go into Indiana, the price is relatively cheap compared to the fact that what people earn in Indiana is smaller than what people earn in the state of Illinois or in Chicago. So I'm simply saying that these are realities. And right now, NNPC has not done a good job by not being transparent with the things that we see.
All right, well, let me ask Dr. Ashibogu, what stands out for you in this conversation so far? I mean, it's been on for years. This is the first time in decades that Nigeria is producing its own petroleum. And there are even retailers out there who said, well, they haven't even seen these particular products to be able to dispense them to Nigerians. But so far, in all of these issues being raised, what stands out the most for you?
Well, let's have some clarity to the whole situation. In the first place, we should ask ourselves if actually the NNPC has supplied crude to the Dangote refinery. From what we understand and from the statements they've made so far, the crude they have at the moment, which they have finished products from, were the ones they imported from outside the country. So, and that is why we are having these to and fro discussions about how much should be the price. They are alluding to the fact that this was supplied in dollars, and so they're going to sell to the NNPC at the dollar value. That's another argument that made the spokesperson of the NNPC come out with a pricing ratio across board. And our pricing metrics here is not built on ability to purchase or people's purchasing power, but rather distance from the distribution centers that account for how people pay more, even in places where they are economically disadvantaged in terms of income. But what we are looking at today is the advent of the refinery was not a guarantee to lower cost of energy products, but rather consistent supply and then reduction on the
Dr. Ashibo, we can't hear you, but I believe that we'll be able to get back to you in no distant future, because the issues you are raising are actually quite germane, and I'm hoping that you can land on those thoughts when we have you back. So, well, Mr. Kunu, the comparisons that you have made are quite important as well. But then there is this upside. Okay, I think we have Dr. Ashibo back. Dr. Ashibo, please, could you go ahead and conclude your thoughts? Okay, we don't have that for now. So, well, Mr. Kunu, please go ahead. The issues that you have raised, they are germane, no doubt about it. But the organized private sector is looking at the upside of the issues being raised. The Nigeria Economic Employers Consultative Association, for instance, believes that the arrangement between the federal government, through the NNPCL and the Dangote petroleum refinery has the potential to reduce pressure on Forex demand in the country. And a number of people are looking at that as a good thing. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that in any business done within the country, two things are very key: incentivization and, of course, consideration or empathy for the people who really are the ones making use of the products. Let's get it straight. I mentioned emphatically that in the United States of America, the price of gasoline, as they call it here, is usually in the States according to, of course, the pay you get. For instance, if you go to California, you're not going to actually buy the same way as you probably will buy in Texas.
Mr. Kuna, I get that argument, but the point that I'm making is because you know that hitherto, whenever we talk about for which reason we understand, even before now, way before now, that it was only the NNPCL that was allowed to import because of the pressure of foreign exchange. And being an organization, for whatever reason, NNPCL was given that sole responsibility by the federal government to import and sell to other people. Hopefully, hoping that if the NNPCL took on that responsibility, fuel will be cheaper for Nigerians. But an average importer, an average independent petroleum marketer that brings the fuel into the country may not be able to sell it at the same discounted rate, if I can use that term, as the NNPCL was selling it at the time. But now that the federal government, has made this, arrangement of Naira for crude and all of that, the hope of the organized private sector is that pressure would reduce on foreign exchange, which will also, foreign exchange demand, which will also tell on the appreciation of the Nigerian Naira to the dollar. Do you agree? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Can I respond to that now?
Please go ahead.
Can I go ahead? All right, let's understand first that as we speak, the NNPCL is still the sole importer. And that in itself, I think, jeopardizes the intent of the Petroleum Industry Act, which to a great extent is supposed to liberalize the petroleum sector. One of the things that the federal government has not done right is to, at this point, still make the NNPC the sole buyer from Dangote. Because right now, nobody takes their trucks there. So if you're talking about appreciating or ensuring that the value of the Naira becomes better, you have to give consideration to other operators within the economy because volume is very key. So when you have only the NNPC, considering the fact that that puts the NNPC at advantage position against others, that means you're shrinking that market to state for the fact. So I think that the first thing we have to consider is, having mentioned to us that the business will be done in Naira to ensure that the value of the Naira is actually what? Appreciated. You have to consider the fact that they told us that won't begin until October. Initially, they didn't give us that timeline that it was going to be October. What we had expected was the first lifting and every kind of transaction done that would have been done in the Naira. But we cannot change what they have said because they said it's October. But ensuring that the Naira is appreciated, you cannot constrain other independent marketers because essentially Dangote is supposedly a private refinery. So I'm going to ask a question why we are still maintaining the NNPC as the one that buys solely from Dangote Refinery, because that itself is a jeopardy of market processes. So if you want to really, and I say here emphatically, if you want the Naira to appreciate, you have to allow other players in, and you have to allow Dangote to a great extent determine certain prices by itself, but you must also incentivize it for it to be able to do so. Let's understand that except, of course, there are things we do not know. Why is the government so intent on ensuring that prices are actually what they want it to be? If Dangote Refinery is truly independent of anything from the federal government, then let it, for instance, determine the price according to market forces. And if there's anything the federal government wants to do with regards to the price, let it do from its own end, because the conversations that have been back and forth in the past 24 hours have been conversations that are ridiculous.
Okay.
Where the NNPC is, yes, please. Yes.
All right. Let me ask Dr. Shibogu. So on the one hand is the issue of energy availability. in this case, PMS. On the other hand, is energy affordability, for which reason some people believe, even I think at some point the NNPCL even made that comment, that according to the PIA, they are the energy security organization, so to speak. So energy sufficiency, energy availability, and energy affordability. What is the balance here, Dr. Shibogu?
Well, I don't think that statement is correct. The law made it a free market. However, NNPC is saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that that happens. But the NNPC is not a regulator anymore, as it should seem. It is also a participant in the market as well, but a major off-taker on behalf of the government of Nigeria. So the impression is not NNPC is not a regulator. The NNPC is a commercial entity, just like Mobil, Ajib, Chevron, and others, as well as independent marketers in the market. But the capacity of the NNPC is what gives them that right to run the retail component of that energy market properly. That's why you have the retail outlets all around the place. So for us as Nigerians, we expect more with this unbundling process that had happened to the NNPC. Sadly, people are expecting more, and we have been getting all manner of controversial stories from them.
But, you still haven't quite, answered that question that I raised about energy availability and energy affordability in the country. The argument, just a second. The argument that Mr. Kuno is raising is that the market should be totally liberalized. But the fear of the federal government is, if the market is totally liberalized, fuel, particularly PMS, will be procured at way costlier rates for the Nigerian. Right now in Borno State, even in Warri, just not too far away here, we understand it sells for 1,500 naira per liter. So if it is not handled by an organization that has a weight, such as the NNPCL, the fear is affordability might be an issue. What's your take?
We're not contending about affordability. The issue is very simple. The answer is just very simple to the entire narrative. Look, NNPC has over 500 retail stations nationwide. Over 500, in thousands. In Lagos alone, it has over 200 retail stations. All the NNPC has to do is to get this product at a competitive price to those outlets and allow others who are participants to sell at whatever price that they deem fit. If somebody is going to sell at 2,000 naira, so be it. That's the problem. The problem is if you have NNPC selling at 855 and others are selling at 2,000 naira and it is available for that 855, I don't think the person who wants to sell at 2,000 naira would keep to that price. It will be unwise. What we have now is that the NNPC has a retail price that has been pegged, for example, in Lagos at 855. The product, is it there? If it's there, then people who are intending to sell at 1,000 or 1,002, like in Warri, will not have that advantage. What we are having is supply, sufficient supply. That's the challenge. So if the refinery such as Dangote and Warri and Port Harcourt come on board, fine. Then you'll be talking about energy sufficiency, and then you would also reduce the pressure on imports. Then those who are in import perhaps will now become off-takers from these big refineries at their own margin. And so they would have to just look at changing their narratives from importation to becoming a distribution giants. Most of them have very big silos around the places and storage facilities, these imported products.
But Dr. Shibogu, just 1 second. On the same issue we are raising, you can't also remonstrate the fact that it is the responsibility of the NNPCL, according to the PIA, to ensure not just availability, but affordability. And I think that is one of the issues.
No, sir. Okay? No, sir. That is not, there's no provision of such in the PIA. The law is very sacrosanct. The law allows the NNPC to represent the interest of states at subnational and national level in the interest of energy sufficiency. There is no place where it says NNPC has the responsibility of making sure that this is available at all times. The market has been made free. The question is, can people bring it in at cost they are important and at the forex risk that we face as a challenge? Let's not transfer all burden to the NNPC and make it look as if it's supposed to have done that. No. We have other independent marketers. They also have the rights to import. There are other oil majors in Nigeria that have the rights to import. So the question we should be asking, what are those guys doing? Why are they not importing? What's the challenge? We should find out what the challenge is.
Could it be?
It is because the NNPC has government interest. That is why everybody is taking a look at it.
Well, I think perhaps one of the issues that have been raised, just one second, Dr. Ashibogo. I think one of the issues that has been raised is also that of availability of Forex, which is why the NECA and a number of other stakeholders are celebrating the fact that the crude supply can now be made to refineries such as Dangote in Nigeria for Naira instead of dollar pricing, which will hopefully reduce the pressure on Forex in the country. I think that's perhaps the issue and the challenge a number of other petroleum product importers may have. What do you think?
Okay, let's take a look at this. Oil production, exploration, productions, and export, and also a supply of crude facilities have a lot of partners in this supply chain and also the value chain of oil and gas. There is no particular installation I've known so far that the NNPC runs 100%. Most of them, they have commitments from joint venture partners. Those joint venture partners also have commitments to the international market in terms of supply and also in terms of delivery. These were prior commitments. What I am particularly concerned about is that if those prior commitments are taken care of and without undermining our local supply, then we wouldn't have a problem. What we have now as a challenge for sufficiency and supply is that those prior commitments supersede the interest of our local distribution.
Okay. All right, and that is
that's a major
issue.
challenge.
Absolutely.
So now receiving the crude in Naira, which is a welcome development, starts October 1. We have 3 weeks to that date. The question is, do we even have this crude available? Because the JV partners with the NNPC needs to give us that assurance that their previous commitments to supply the international market will not undermine also this energy sufficiency and supply to the local refineries like Dangote and
well,
other
Dr.
refineries
Ashibogo, I think just as you have said, and I think it's something that Mr. Kuna has also raised, that is a problem for the federal government to solve. We'll hear more about that in the president, hopefully in the president's October 1 address. In the meantime, let's take a short break. When we return, Kayla has questions for you.
All right, I'm going to start off with Mr. Kunu. Of course, he's an international public affairs analyst. And you know, I want to go back to something that Ayo talked about, which is a liberalized market, especially when it comes to this petrol situation and this oil sector. Is that something that will happen? Because it does feel sometimes like we're taking a step forward and several steps back, you know, just from an analyst's perspective. A liberalized market, is that something in Nigeria's foreseeable future in the oil sector? And what impact would that have? Is it even possible right now? Mr. Kunu, can you hear me?
I can't hear anything if you guys can hear me. I can't hear anything.
Yes, if you can hear me, I was trying to find out about a liberalized market and if that's something that is possible in Nigeria's foreseeable future and what impact that would have on the purchasing power of the Nigeria, just from an analyst's perspective. Is it something that can even be done right now?
It is possible, but do not forget that anytime they talk about liberalizing a market, the government that actually is at the center of such liberalization must be willing and must be ready to hands off properly. I need to say here with emphasis that everything about liberalizing the market itself wasn't done thoroughly. And if you look at even the operations or the administration of the Petroleum Industry Act, it has not been done accordingly. Since the NNPC, for instance, NNPCL has been in operation. Let's look at it. Has there been any meeting with those who are key stakeholders? Now, there was something Dr. Shibugu said that is instructive. Dr. Shibugu mentioned that we're talking about commitment to joint venture partners. If the NNPCL understands that there's a constraint on ground regarding the joint venture partners, which will impede the fluidity of its operation with the current agreement, what the NNPCL would have done is to allow a lot of other players in the industry to be part of this development, to be part of those who go to take this product, to be part of those who distribute. Dr. Shibogu also mentioned that why is it that other independent participants in the industry weren't doing something? At the moment, the NNPC is the sole importer. It's not about others not willing to do that. If you are the sole importer, what do you expect others to do? So you cannot liberalize the market entirely until you have other players permitted to do so and given the same access. Don't forget that a couple of months back, there were complaints about the NNPCL getting the advantage position in terms of the availability of Forex that is needed for the market itself. And I need to say here that the government must endeavor as much as possible to allow every other player at this point. Now look at it. Prioritizing joint venture agreement will, without a doubt, continue to constrain the supply that is necessary for Nigerians. You cannot take away that position from this conversation. So right now, NNPC should itemize its commitment to joint venture partners. If it is going to be able to operate 50%, allow other independent marketers operate at the same level, giving equal access. Because Ayo was asking the question of availability and affordability.
Oh, yeah.
If we cannot emphasize the importance of availability, then we're going to be able to have, we can't have the success we expect to have. So availability is fair, and it is obvious the NNPC doesn't have the capacity to deliver in that regard, which has been the problem in the past couple of weeks.
I'm going to come back to that question about affordability in a bit, but I want to be able to speak with Mr. Ashibogu. Mr. Ashibogu, you know, one of the conversations that's come out of this whole drama, especially when we saw the NNPCL and Dangote and the back and forth between both of them, the presidential council the presidential committee that heads the CNG initiative, you know, they decided to see this as an opportunity to speak to the Nigerian people. In fact, I've heard the person in charge of that committee many times say, look, this petrol is not a patriotic product. The industry itself, a lot of people are complaining about the transparency in that industry. And then all of this going on right now. CNG is the way to go. Just so you can talk to us about it, because we saw people coming out trying to get their cars converted to CNG as an alternative. Have they gotten the buy-in of the Nigerian people? In your view, are we ready as a people to find an alternative to this petrol?
Well, I think for most of us who are quite conversant with climate change issues, the CNG will be a way to go, because one of the advantages of the CNG is clean energy, and also it's also environmental friendly. But the question we have now is the capacity of the transition to be seamless. It's quite costly for you to have to convert those kits, except you're going to get support from government. And that has been what the federal government just announced, that they were releasing CNG kits nationwide for places where people could go do conversion. And then some of them are saying it is free. But it's another question for another day. But I think moving towards the gas market, we have sufficient gas as a country. If you looked at our energy framework, we have more gas than even petrol, diesel, and others that come from the crude. So it will be good to go the way of gas. I am using gas, LPG, for my generators at home, not CNG. But I think it's been cost effective for me than using petrols on the generators. But the truth be said, we need to know that transitions don't come easy. And I expected that they should have created a framework for it, a transition timeline to enable people transit seamlessly and without having to bear humongous cost that would cost will cause disruptions in the system that we have today. People are walking around with so much uncertainty. Are we sure that when we transit to gas, there will be higher demand on gas and the price will not shoot up again and we'll be going back to the way of petrol? That was the narrative we had with diesel. So that's our worry.
I mean, just to follow up on that, do you think that the drive towards conversion to compressed natural gas, are you sure they will not have to face some kind of kickback from these big players in the oil sector? Is it something that you think would work out just the way it is?
It's even in the interest of the oil players for gas to come out because they're also producers of CNG. So that's a new market for them. And if the consumption is high, you're talking about a population of 220 million people who are using the gas for powering houses, for machineries, for their cars, for the entire gamut of energy sufficiency. Can rest on CNG. And that would also reduce the pressure for us as a country when we look at the export costs for petrol and other petrochemical products that come from crude.
And
So
one
we
of the
could
things I wanted to
generate
get
some,
from you
yeah.
really is about the buy-in of the Nigerian people. I mean, one of the visuals that we keep showing is that canister that is installed in somebody's car that is being converted to CNG. And for me personally, I have issues with a canister in my car, even though they've explained to
It's a
me
question of perception.
even though they've explained to me over and over again that it is safe, it's okay, you can do, because I have to think of an alternative. This petrol lifestyle is becoming very expensive. So, I'm thinking about it, but I don't know how I feel about having a canister in my car. But where I'm leading this up to is the buy-in of the Nigerian people. Are they doing what they can? Is there enough information and buy-in of the Nigerian people so we can start to look at alternatives while NNPCL and Dangote sort themselves out?
Well, it will take time. It will take time. Definitely. I think there's a need for some form of reorientation. There's a need for some form of education about the benefits of CNG. I share your fear of having the canister. Look at it's just like having a drum. There's a drum beneath your car that is, having about 50 liters or 80 liters of fuel, which is highly inflammable. So, but the truth is that because of the enclosement where you don't get to see
I
it,
don't see it, so I
you
don't
don't have.
care.
Yeah. So you don't have that phobia, that morbid fear. But with a canister in your car, and then some persons have to imagine, oh, if there's heat or whatever, they allude to, if you've had any domestic accidents with an LPG or you've witnessed that, you start to imagine that, a gas canister in your car. But however, they are built within every safe parameters, and they follow the safety rules of installing them in vehicles. There are people using them all over the world, and we've had less cases of accidents from vehicles uh, being powered by CNG. But the truth be said, it comes with its own risk, it comes with its own advantage. But what we've seen so far is that the advantage outweighs the disadvantages. You are also going to save the environment and a lot of carbon that depletes the ozone layer and so on and so forth.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Kunu. We were talking about affordability earlier. And the impact of this hike on everything, because it's not just about the price of petrol. For people who don't have cars, they're not going to be able to buy, they're not going to buy petrol anyway, but it will affect everything else in their lives, the cost of food, cost of transportation, all of these things. So let's talk about that hike. What's the foreseeable future? Because one thing we know as a people is I've never seen the price of anything go down in Nigeria, at least in my life. In my lifetime, I haven't seen the price of anything go down. Once it goes up, it just keeps going up and up and up. So with what's happened right now, do you see any scenario where whatever kind of agreement by the 1st of October, whatever it is that we're waiting for, are we going to see a reduction in the price of petrol at some point? And if we don't, what's the foreseeable future for the Nigerian? And how should the Nigerian start to plan their future, planning how to live with our present reality?
All right. Let me tell you one of the things that has enabled success in other democracies when it talked about government and this kind of situation. It is a consistency of policies. Now, it is a near disaster that in September we've had different prices for the most.
I'm
For
sorry,
what is
Mr. Kunu, I'm going to get back to you right now, but I think we do have a live event coming up. I'm going to throw it to Lagos so they can give us that breakdown.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Kayla. Very, very quickly, just to let you know, in fact, we probably even need to go now, but there is a big boots lesson from military service event that's happening at, well, actually right there in your city in Abuja. It's going to be taking place at the Armed Forces Officers Mess, and it's going to be happening any moment now. Of course, you'll be able to see it on DSTV, but for those of you who are on other platforms, you'll still be able to see us. So please go ahead, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Ayo. Yes, Mr. Kunu, you can finish your thoughts on the question.
Okay, so thank you very much. I was saying that in a situation where you have inconsistency of policies, it will definitely affect anything that has to do with Nigerians being able to cope with what's on ground. Nigerians will find it difficult to cope because we do not know what the price of the same petrol will be, the PMS, just by maybe in 2 weeks' time. In September alone, we had different pricing. So that is a reflection of the inconsistency of policy. Now, you were talking about the use of CNG. The question is, as we speak, there is nothing on paper regarding the entire places in Lagos, for instance, where you can actually have CNG in your car. So if people decide to take their vehicles and they do the hybrid thing on their vehicles, how easy will it be for them to be able to have access? We have to try as much as possible to avoid fire brigade approach when we want to solve problems, and that itself is inconsistency. Right now, if I put the number of vehicles in Lagos at 5 million, what is the kind of orientation or sensitization, as Dr. Ashibogu said, that is available for people? In this part of the world, I have driven CNG, powered vehicles here, and I tell you, there's nothing to fear. But what is the level of education out there for people? Then at the same time, you're talking about the number of places needed where you can actually have people conveniently drive into, have this CNG and move away. What is the pricing system for it? Because there are certain things that will precede just telling people that they can, consider alternatives. So when you talk about what the foreseeable future is, I think the foreseeable future is still going to be pretty challenging because there's a lot of instability as far as getting the PMS and getting the crude is concerned. Then it's time for NNPC and Dangote to be very, very open in whatever it is they're doing. The crude in question belongs to the Nigerian people. And I personally have questioned, I have to say that for the past 2 years and counting, I've been questioning the process through which the NNPC suddenly became NNPCL and how they already passed the PIA, and now the PIA itself is not being followed. So I mean,
the conversation around what you just mentioned is one that we'll have to have another time, but unfortunately, it is time for us to wrap up this segment. But I want to thank you very much, Mr. Adeniyi Kunu, International Public Affairs Analyst, joining us there from Chicago in the USA. Thank you for being with us on the program. And Mr. Monday Ashibogu, former editor, Energy Watch, join us on Zoom. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Business Morning on Sunrise Daily comes up now. Stay with us.